Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name's Stephen and I'm a fantasy writer. Today I'm going to do another book tag thing, answer a series of questions that gives you a bit more information about me as a writer. Question 1, what kind of a writer are you? So I write predominantly science fiction and fantasy novels. I've also done some screenplays. In the past I've written comics, but at the moment I'm focusing on novels and a couple of other screenplay projects off to a side I'm co-writing with a friend, but most of the time it's novels and novellas. Question 2, when did you start writing? What made you want to start writing? I was always writing as a kid, making up stories in school, and we had writing assignments. I'd be happiest doing those in middle school, and then in high school I did English language for sort of the college level, I guess you'd call it, and I did a writing thing for that. I think I wrote the first couple of chapters of what became my first ever fantasy novel when I was about 17, and I went on to finish writing that novel. It was awful, but I was writing even back then, so it was just something I figured I'd always wanted to do and always would do. Question 3, what inspires your stories? Everything. It's like saying where does the writer get their ideas from? Everywhere. Everything inspires me. Everything I see, everything I touch, smell, taste, every TV show, every film, every book, every comic, conversations, people, all of it goes in my brain and swirls around and ideas pop out, and I judge them and think about them and say, is it any good? Is it actually any good? Is it not? The best way to do it is I write a bunch of ideas down, I come back to them later on and look at them and think, that sounded brilliant, and then a month later you look at it and you go, no, that's awful, or I've just seen that on television. Oh yeah, that's where my idea came from. So it's always have to be mindful, you're not just copying something, but yeah, everything just kind of swirls around, and so go out there and do as much as you can, and that'll help you create great ideas and great stories, I think. Question 4, what themes do you explore in your writing? It really varies. Sometimes I know what the theme is going into the book, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I keep the theme in mind that helps me as I'm working on that first draft. So if I ever start to drift off, I can kind of course correct. Other times I don't know what the theme is. Themes I've explored in the past are people have strange relationships with their parents, or difficult and complicated relationships. I've written about that. I've written about fame. I've written about celebrity culture. I've written about war. I've written about horror, individual horror and sort of wide-scale horror that people can experience. So it's really hard to pin down. There are some themes that probably come up and repeat in my work, particularly around people, to do with where people can be judged to how they look, or you make a snap perception of somebody and it turns out not to be true. So that's something I probably revisit every now and again, I would think. It just really depends upon the story, and then the theme will develop or not. Question 5, are you a pantser or a plotter or a bit of both? So I think being a pantser or a plotter is not obsolete. It's not all extremes, one or the other. I think it exists on a spectrum. I think even those people who say they're pantsers, where they make it all up absolutely all the time, I don't think that's technically true. I think they think about things as they're going along. When they're out doing other things, they're ticking things over in their brain. And the same with plotters. They put a lot of the detail down, but how they get between certain things they don't know. And I fall into that kind of category. I plan my stories, beginning, middle and end. I have milestones along the way, but I don't know how I get from one milestone to the next. I have ideas for the characters, how they'll develop, but some of it I only discover when I'm actually writing it. That's the best thing you can do, really, is just get in there and start having a go and seeing what develops and play around with it. Question 6, where are you in your journey? Are you querying? Do you have an agent? Are you published? So I am published. I queried an agent for many, many years trying to get one. I've got other videos in about how I found an agent. You can go and watch that there. But I tried many years to get an agent unsuccessfully. I wrote many novels and eventually I got one, worked with the agent on the book. We then sent it out on submission. It was picked up, and I was originally published in 2015 by Orbit Books. They picked up my first trilogy. Since then I've done 6 books, 2 trilogies with Orbit, that's all fantasy. And I've got a duology, a 2-book series with Angry Robot Books. The first one, The Coward, came out in June 2021, and the sequel, The Warrior, will be out in June 2022. And I'm working on something new at the moment, which no one knows about. Question 7. Have you ever entered any writing contests, finals, and did you win? I've entered a lot of different writing competitions over the years. Some of them to do with books, some of them to do with screenplays. We've got good feedback in the past on things I've co-written and things I've written as solo. I got to a quarter-final on a pilot script for a TV competition only last year. A couple of the screenplays, they've done quite well and got good feedback and sort of quarter-finals, but I've never actually won any of them, and I've never won any writing competitions. Just kept trying in terms of the agent thing and submissions, and I guess I won that way. Question 8. Who are your writing heroes? I've got so many. So going back to when I was young, reading books, fantasy growing up, people like Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, Ursula Le Guin, Terry Brooks, David Eddings when I was growing up was very popular. David Gemmell, massive influence on me when I was a teenager and still now is a huge influence on my work. Robin Hobb, she's a fantastic writer. If I think about more modern fantasy writers, there are a lot of people that I admire. Jim Butcher for the Dresden Files, he's really fantastic for doing that kind of urban fantasy stuff. Bradley Beaulieu's fantasy writer, he's fantastic. The stuff he creates for the Song of the Shattered Sands is absolutely spectacular. In terms of broader writers, Joe Michael Straczynski, he's written comics, TV, films, now he's doing novels. He's fantastic, he's amazing. Joss Whedon for Firefly and Buffy and Angel. I mean, Firefly is still one of my favourite TV shows and a great film, and it's short-lived, but it's still really, really good. Filmmakers like Christopher Nolan, he's an incredible storyteller. Denis Villeneuve, he's fantastic. Ridley Scott. So I'm influenced from TV, film, books, comics. People like Brian Bendis is a great comic book writer. Ed Brubaker. Tom King has done some great stuff. His Mr. Miracle run is one of the best comics I've ever read in my life, and I've been reading them for decades. John Ostrander is a fantastic comic writer. He brought the Suicide Squad forth and made it something spectacular, like the film that you've seen very recently. Greg Rucka is a great writer of books and TV and film. Terry Moore is another great comic book writer and amazing artist. He writes and draws most of his own things. He's brilliant. So I've got influences from all over. Fantastic writers. Question 9. Have you ever been to a writing conference? Share your best or worst conference experience. Yes, I've been to many writing conventions and festivals over the year. Here in the UK, where I live, we have 2 or 3 a year, depending on what's happening, COVID. And I've went to as many as I could and tried to learn as much as I could. Went to all the panels, listened to all the writers, all the editors, all the agents who are now going to events for years now, and they talk about their experiences, what they're looking for, the kind of thing they like, what they don't like, turn-offs, all that kind of stuff. So I went to all of these events and tried to glean as much information as I could. Worst and best experience was probably at the same event. Years ago, I went to a writing festival in York, and this was a sort of it wasn't open to the public. You had to pay to attend to get a ticket, and you couldn't sort of just turn up on the day. And it was all designed for people who are serious about writing. It wasn't sort of just go along and look at and listen to panels. It was you go along with a nearly finished book or a finished book, and you get a chance to sit down with agents, with editors, with other published writers and talk to them. And this is quite an expensive festival. So I talked it over with my partner, and we decided, okay, it's quite important. It's a great opportunity that I can't afford to miss. I had my book, it was a crime novel. I was really quite pleased with it and quite happy. I sent it in and I had to sit down with 2 agents, except when I got there, one of the agents had called in sick, so I wasn't able to attend, unfortunately, and the other one wasn't there. Instead, I sat down with a published author, and she told me and said, I think this is really, really good. I think my agent would really like this. It's right up her street. I'm going to take this and give it to her with my blessing and my recommendation. And I thought, this is brilliant. This is the best news ever. And other people come out of their meetings and they were sort of saying, oh, I didn't really get good feedback. And so I sort of bit my lip and said, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, but inside I'm like, wee. And I thought, oh, fantastic. And then later on that day, there's sort of a party and you can mingle and talk to other people. And I started talking to this other agent and he said, well, tell me about your book. What is it about? And I told him, and he sort of looked at me and he said, that sounds really vanilla. It just sounds a bit boring. It's not something that I think is going to do very well. And I was so deflated after flying high and thinking, oh great, you know, oh I'm on my way, suddenly to being told, yeah, it's not really that special. It did go off to this agent and she read it and said it was okay, but it didn't have that kind of X factor. So he was right, but it was such a kind of a low blow to be riding high and then suddenly kind of come crashing right down again. But after that I went on to write a fantasy novel and then another fantasy novel, and then that was the one that got picked up. So happy ending in the end, but it was tough and a long road and many rejections to get there. Question 10. 3 tips you'd give to newbie writers. Okay, tip number 1 from me. Whether you're a pantser or a plotter, whether you're someone who makes up the books as you go along, or you think you're just going to plan it all out. For your first book, if you've never finished and written an entire book before, plan it. You might say, oh, well, I want to make it up in the spur of the moment and all this. Great. However, on your first book, plan some of it so that you know where you're going, so that you've got a roadmap. How detailed that is up to you, but plan it, because a lot of people who try to write their first book, they never finish it. They never get there. They kind of get to 20, 30, 40,000 and they begin to stumble and they're not really sure and they kind of question themselves and they go back and edit it again and again and thinking, oh no. So if you have a plan and a roadmap, you know where you're going, you've constantly got something in the distance, you can keep looking ahead and going, right, I've got to get to this bit, right, let's work to that moment. And then you've done that bit and then the next moment you're working towards and finish that book. So my second tip is set targets and be realistic. Don't say, I'm going to write the book in a month, that's it, it'll be done. If you think you can realistically do it in a year, do it in a year and then set monthly targets just to keep yourself moving forward. That would be my tip. If you don't hit those targets, don't, try and flagellate yourself and beat yourself up. But it's good to just have some kind of a target for momentum so that if at the end of a year, end of 12 months, or even 2 years, you can look back and say, I've written a book. That's what I wanted to do. I set out to finish it. I finished it. So plan it. And tip 2 is some kind of writing target or schedule. I think is a great idea. Tip number 3, don't be disheartened if your first book isn't a smash success, isn't picked up by an agent, doesn't sell 1 million copies. Most writers don't make it on their first novel. It's a hard fact to swallow, but it's the truth. I and many other writers have been rejected. Many of the big names have all been rejected. So don't be disheartened if your first book doesn't take off. Writing, like anything else, takes practice. I'm not sure I subscribe to the Gladwell rule of 10,000 hours or the million words thing that some people say, but writing a book is a challenge. It's a marathon. You've got to work on it and you've got to practice it. And the process of writing a book, you learn a lot just by doing it. Even if that first book, second book, third book doesn't go anywhere, you will learn something from it every time. You learn about yourself as a writer, you learn about yourself of the craft of writing, you'll see what your own strengths and weaknesses are, you get feedback from other people, and you improve, and you get better and you improve. And it might be that on that third book, an agent says, this is quite good, I like it. But you can't always jump straight to that point. There are no shortcuts of writing. Yes, before someone says, well, I wrote my first book and it was picked up and it was published and I did very, very well. Great. Most people don't have that experience and you have to accept that. You have to work on it. You have to practice it. I think writing is like a muscle. It's like anything else. The best sportsman doesn't say, I'm just going to run 100 meters. I'm going to beat the world record straight away. I'm just going to do that. Yep, I'm going to do it in 9 seconds. You can't physically do it. And it's the same with writing. You practice, you get better. You keep the muscle agile. If you write one day and you don't write anything for 6 months, you're going to be rusty. You're going to struggle. You're going to have a real challenge. You've got to keep that flexibility, which is another reason I said to have targets. Don't write every day. I've done a video about that, about why that is bad writing advice, but write as often as you can and keep practicing and keep improving and keep getting better. So those are my 3 tips for newbie writers. Right, that's all I'm going to talk about for today, but I'll be back very soon with another video.